The screams of Emily Stevens echoed across the cosmos as alien blades ripped her innocent flesh, unleashing the primitive beasts lying dormant within human DNA, thirsting for vengeance. On a dimly lit space station orbiting a distant gas giant, two reptilian breens sat nursing drinks, discussing galactic events. Nox, a battle-scarred veteran, turned to his young companion Zax. The humans declared war on the Kravax Empire. Huge mistake by the Kravax. They killed a human girl named Emily, pushed the humans too far this time. How bad will it get? Zax asked, scales flashing green with curiosity. Bad, Nox growled. That girl's father is a human admiral. He broadcast her death across the galaxy, demanding justice. But the Galactic Council did nothing as usual, too scared of Kravax military might. Nox took a long swig of blue liquid. That's when Admiral Stevens shocked us all. Said if the Council stayed silent, humanity would take action. Uttered the most chilling words I've ever heard. Nox's reptilian eyes narrowed. He said, "We will unleash the ancient warbeasts of Earth. Every species knows the stories. Primal creatures from human prehistory, made extinct long ago. Nightmarish things from their world's savage past." "I thought those were only legends," Zax said. "Myth and rumor." "All legends hold truth," Nox muttered. "If Stevens found a way to resurrect those monsters, fuse them with human fury, gods help the Kravax. They doomed us all when they took his child." Nox looked out at the stars, as if watching for the human dreadbeasts to appear. "This is only the beginning. The galaxy will burn, all because one foolish species dared to test humanity's wrath." Zax's eyes widened, his mouth agape. Ancient warbeasts? From human prehistory? I thought those were just stories told to hatchlings. Nox shook his head, taking another long sip. No, they were real. Earth was once home to nightmarish predators, long before humans took to the stars. Massive reptiles called dinosaurs, giant sea monsters, colossal apes, stuff of legend. But how could such primitive beasts pose any threat to a star-spanning empire like the Kravax? Zax asked. Normally they couldn't, Nox said. But the humans, crafty bastards that they are, had a plan. For centuries they'd been collecting DNA samples, preserving the genetic blueprints of these extinct creatures, waiting for the right moment. Nox leaned in, his voice low. When the Kravax murdered that poor girl and the Council turned a blind eye, the humans knew it was time. They'd been working on something called Project Behemoth, in secret, resurrecting these ancient beasts, but better, stronger, faster, smarter, melding them with the best human tech and engineering. "Gods above," Zax whispered. "So the humans actually did it, brought back monsters from their world's savage past." "Did more than that," Nox said with a dark chuckle. "They set them loose. Kravax never saw it coming. Thought their mighty warships and armies could crush humanity easily. But we started hearing stories from the edges of human space. Kravax scouts going dark, ships just vanishing, outposts overrun by something." Nox polished off his drink. "By the time those Kravax bastards realized the trouble they were in, it was too late. Humanity's vengeance was already on the march, an army of abominations, fueled by human fury and loss. The warbeasts of ancient Earth, reborn and unleashed." Zax swallowed hard. What happened next? Nox signaled the bartender for another round. "That's a story for another time, but know this, the Kravax fucked around and found out. They poked the wrong beast, thought humans were soft, easy prey, didn't realize the monsters lurking in humanity's past, the primordial nightmares they could resurrect." Zax clenched his claws, his scales rippling with a mix of awe and dread. "Tigers, bears, wolves. By the void, those sound like creatures straight out of a nightmare, and you said they could tear through Kravax armor like it was nothing." Nox nodded, his eyes distant as if seeing the carnage unfold before him. "Oh yes, the Kravax troops didn't know what hit them. One moment they're marching in formation, plasma rifles at the ready, thinking they're invincible. The next, there's a blur of fur and claws, and they're being ripped apart. Their armor might as well have been made of paper for all the good it did. And the bears, by the stars. I heard one of those things took on a Kravax heavy assault mech, the kind they use to level cities. It was like watching a child play with a toy. The bear just shrugged off the plasma cannons, closed the distance in a heartbeat, and tore the mech's cockpit open like a ration can. The pilot didn't even have time to scream. Zack shuddered, his drink forgotten as he leaned forward, hanging on Nox's every word. What about the wolves? How could mere pack animals pose a threat to the Kravax war machine? Nox grinned, a glint of admiration in his eyes. Never underestimate the power of teamwork, my friend. The humans didn't just bring these creatures back, they made them smarter, able to coordinate and plan like a military unit. A pack of these wolves could outmaneuver and outflank a Kravax battalion, picking them off one by one. It was like they had a hive mind, always one step ahead. But the space orcas, those were the real game changers. Imagine a creature the size of a frigate, armored like a dreadnought that can move like a fighter craft. The Kravax had no defense against them. Their ships would just vanish, swallowed whole or torn to pieces. I heard the orcas could even breach the shields by generating some kind of focused gravity pulse. Terrifying stuff. Zack swallowed hard, trying to process the scope of the destruction. How could the humans control such monsters? What's to stop them from turning on their creators? Nox leaned back, a hint of respect in his voice. That's the genius of it. The humans didn't try to dominate these beasts. They worked with them. Those neural interfaces I mentioned, they allowed human handlers to bond with the creatures, to guide their instincts and fury. It was a partnership, a perfect fusion of human strategy and animal ferocity. The handlers were in the thick of it too, fighting alongside their charges, leading from the front. That kind of loyalty, that unity of purpose, the Kravax could never hope to match it. Nox nodded sagely, his gaze distant as he recalled the reports that had flooded in. The Kravax never saw it coming. They thought they could crush humanity's spirit, but all they did was awaken a sleeping giant. And once the other oppressed races saw the humans taking the fight to their tormentors, it was like a dam bursting. Centuries of pent-up rage and resentment, all unleashed at once. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. I heard stories of the Zorlax, a species the Kravax had enslaved for generations, rising up and storming their overseers' compounds. They tore through the guards like they were made of paper, their claws and fangs ripping through armor like it was nothing. And the Velox, those clever bastards, they sabotaged the Kravax's communication networks, isolating their forces and sowing chaos in their ranks. Zack shook his head in wonder. It's like the humans lit a spark and it spread like wildfire across the galaxy, a rebellion on a scale never seen before. He chuckled darkly. The Kravax tried to adapt, to counter the humans' strategies, but they were always one step behind. They'd develop new weapons to take down the bears, only to find themselves swarmed by packs of wolves. They'd reinforce their shipyards against tiger infiltration, only to have their fleets torn apart by space orcas. It was like trying to plug 1,000 leaks in a sinking ship. Zax leaned back, his mind reeling at the scope of the conflict. So what happens now? Is the war still raging, or have the Kravax been defeated? Nox drained the last of his drink, slamming the glass down on the table. That's the thing about wars like this. They don't just end neatly. The Kravax have been pushed back, their empire crumbling, but they're not done yet. They're like a wounded beast, cornered and desperate, and that makes them all the more dangerous. He fixed Zax with a piercing stare. Mark my words, this is just the beginning. The galaxy has been set ablaze, and there's no telling how far the flames will spread. But one thing's for sure, the humans and their allies won't rest until the Kravax are nothing but ashes and memory. They've awoken a force that won't be satisfied until justice is served, no matter the cost. Zax swallowed hard, the weight of Nox's words settling heavily on his shoulders. He looked out at the stars once more, wondering what new chapters of history were being written among them, and what role he might play in the coming storm. Zax shook his head in disbelief. I can't even imagine what that must have been like, to see your greatest weapons turned against you, to watch them fall one by one. He leaned back, his eyes distant. I remember the reports that came in, of entire packs of wolves turning on their handlers, of bears rampaging through human encampments. It was chaos, pure and simple. The virus spread so quickly, there was no time to contain it. Zax's scales rippled with horror. How many did you lose? How many warbeasts fell to the Kravax's vile scheme? He shook his head. But even in the midst of that horror, there were moments of hope. I heard stories of handlers who refused to abandon their charges. Even as the virus took hold, they stayed by their side, trying to comfort them in their final moments. It was a bond that went beyond mere tactical necessity. It was a brotherhood, a shared sense of purpose. Zax's eyes widened. And the kill switch, how did that work? Nox tapped his temple. Neural implants, every warbeast had one, a failsafe in case something like this ever happened. When the virus reached a critical stage, the implants kicked in, shutting down the warbeast's higher brain functions. It was a mercy, in a way, better a quick death than a slow descent into madness. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. But even with the kill switch, the damage was done. The Kravax had struck a blow at the very heart of humanity's war effort. They thought they had finally found a way to win. Zax frowned. But they were wrong, weren't they? The humans, they didn't give up? Nox grinned, a fierce, predatory expression. No, they didn't. You see, the Kravax had made a fatal mistake. They thought that by taking away humanity's monsters, they had broken their spirit. But all they had done was piss them off. He slammed his fist on the table, making their drinks jump. You want to know what the humans did? They took that anger, that grief, and they forged it into a weapon. They took the technology they had used to create the Warbeasts and they turned it on the Kravax. They made new monsters, ones that were faster, stronger, smarter than anything that had come before. Zax's jaw dropped. They made more Warbeasts even after what happened? Nox shook his head. Not Warbeasts. Something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They called them juggernauts, massive, bipedal war machines, piloted by the most skilled and ruthless soldiers humanity had to offer. Each one was a walking tank, bristling with weapons and armor, capable of taking on entire Kravax battalions single-handedly. He leaned back, a satisfied smirk on his face. And that was just the beginning. The humans, they didn't stop there. They took the lessons they had learned from the Warbeasts and applied them to every aspect of their military. They created new ships, new weapons, new tactics that the Kravax simply couldn't counter. Zax was silent for a long moment, trying to process the scope of what he was hearing. So what you're saying is... Nox nodded. The humans took their greatest defeat and turned it into their greatest triumph. They showed the galaxy what they were truly made of. Not just their ingenuity, not just their courage, but their sheer, unrelenting will to survive. They looked into the abyss, and they spat in its eye. Zax let out a low whistle, his eyes wide with wonder. The stories I've heard about Admiral Stevens, they don't even come close to capturing the truth of his bravery. To lead that final charge, knowing it would be his last. Nox nodded solemnly, his gaze distant as if reliving the memories. It was a sight to behold, my friend, Stevens and Tigris side by side, a whirlwind of fury and determination. They cut through the Kravax defenses like a hot knife through butter, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. He paused, taking a long pull from his drink. I was there, you know, not on the station itself, but part of the fleet that brought them in. We watched on the view screens as they fought their way deeper and deeper into the heart of the enemy stronghold. Zax leaned forward, hanging on every word. What was it like to witness such heroism firsthand? Nox's scales rippled with emotion, a mix of pride and grief. It was humbling, inspiring, terrifying to see the bond between Stevens and Tigris, the way they moved as one, anticipating each other's every move. It was like nothing I've ever seen before or since. His voice grew hushed, almost reverent. And when they reached the Central Command, when they faced down the Kravax leadership, even through the screens, you could feel the weight of that moment, the fate of the galaxy, hanging in the balance. Zax shook his head in disbelief. And they did it. They actually did it. They struck the blow that turned the tide of the war. Nox raised his glass, a silent toast to fallen heroes. They did. But the cost of it, when we realized they weren't coming back, that they had sacrificed themselves to buy us time to escape. He trailed off, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've seen a lot of death in my time, Zax, but nothing hit me quite like that moment. The realization of what they had given, the magnitude of their courage." Zax reached out, placing a comforting hand on Nox's arm. "Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. They changed the course of history, altered the very fabric of our galaxy." Nox met his gaze, a fierce pride burning in his eyes. "They did. And that's why we keep fighting, why we'll never stop fighting, because if we let the Kravax win, if we let their sacrifice be in vain, then we don't deserve the freedom they bought for us." He raised his glass once more, his voice ringing out in the quiet of the bar. "To Admiral Stevens and Tigris, may their legacy endure, and may we strive every day to be worthy of it." Zax raised his own glass, the clink of their drinks a solemn pact. "To Stevens and Tigris, heroes of the galaxy now and forever." They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, in the weight of the history they had witnessed. And though the war still raged, though the future remained uncertain, in that moment there was a flicker of hope, a sense that as long as there were those willing to fight and die for what was right, the galaxy would never truly be lost. Zax sat back in his chair, trying to wrap his mind around the sheer audacity of the Kravax's final plan. A doomsday weapon? Nanobots that could destroy all technology? That's madness. They would have wiped out centuries of progress, reduced us all to primitives. Zax shuddered, his scales rippling with unease. And the humans found out about this, through a captured scientist? "That's right," Nox confirmed. "They'd taken a high-ranking Kravax researcher during the assault on the Central Command. Took them a while to break him, but when they did—" He shook his head. "Well, let's just say the intel he provided was critical. Without it, we might not be sitting here today." Zax leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "So what did they do? How did they stop the Kravax from deploying this weapon?" Nox's expression turned somber. "They sent in a team led by one of Stevens's most trusted men. Jack Carter, his name was. A real hard case, tough as they come. He and his squad infiltrated the facility where the weapon was being developed." Zax's eyes widened. "They went in alone against a doomsday device?" Nox's gaze turned distant, as if seeing the events unfold in his mind's eye. "They had to fight their way through level by level. The Kravax threw everything they had at them, soldiers, battle drones, auto turrets. It was a meat grinder." Zax swallowed hard, trying to imagine the desperation of that fight, but they made it through. "They did," Nox said quietly, "but the cost was high. Most of Carter's team didn't make it back, and Carter himself, he was badly wounded, took a plasma bolt to the gut, but he kept going, pushed through the pain." "That's humans for you," Nox said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "They're a stubborn bunch. They don't know how to quit. Carter's team fought their way to the central lab, found the prototype weapon. They set their charges, blew the damn thing to atoms. And the lead scientist, the one who designed it." Zax sat back, trying to absorb the weight of the tale. "I can't even imagine," he murmured, "the courage that must have taken, the sacrifice." Nox nodded solemnly. "That's the price of war," he said quietly. "Heroes like Carter, they give everything. They lay down their lives so that others might live, so that we might have a future." Zax was silent for a long moment, his thoughts whirling. The magnitude of what the humans had done, the risks they had taken, it defied belief. Finally he spoke, his voice hushed with awe. "The humans," he said softly, "they really are something else, aren't they?" Nox chuckled, a sound tinged with both respect and wariness. "That they are, my friend, that they are, and the galaxy will never be the same because of them." Nox nods, a glint of admiration in his eyes. Trickery is one way to put it. The humans, they think differently than most species. They don't just look for the obvious solutions, the brute force approach. They find weaknesses, exploit vulnerabilities that others overlook. It's what makes them such formidable adversaries. Zax leans forward, his scales shimmering with curiosity. "So what happened next? With their communications crippled, the Kravax must have been in disarray. Oh, they were, Nox confirms, but they were still dangerous. Like a wounded beast lashing out in its death throes, they had ships scattered across the galaxy, each one a potential threat. The humans and their allies had to hunt them down, one by one. He takes another sip of his drink, savoring the burn. It was a long, grueling campaign. The Kravaks fought for every inch of space, every barren moon and asteroid field. They knew they were beaten, but they were determined to make the humans pay for every victory. Zax shakes his head, trying to imagine the scale of the conflict. How long did it take to root them out completely? Years, Nox says, his voice heavy with memory. It was a war of attrition, a slow, grinding conflict that tested the resolve of everyone involved. But the humans, they never wavered. They had come too far, lost too much to turn back now. He leans back, his gaze distant. I remember the day it ended. The news spread like wildfire from system to system, planet to planet. The last Kravak stronghold had fallen, their final fleet destroyed. The war was over. The galaxy was free. Nox chuckles, a sound tinged with both respect and wariness. Oh, they didn't just fade away, if that's what you're asking. They had proven themselves, earned the respect and fear of every species in the galaxy. They took their place among the great powers, a force to be reckoned with. He leans forward, his eyes intense. But they didn't rest on their laurels. They knew that the galaxy was still a dangerous place, that there would always be new threats to face. So they rebuilt, they expanded, they prepared. They took the lessons they had learned from the war and applied them to everything they did. Zax nods slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. They became the guardians, the protectors of the galaxy. In a way, yes, Nox agrees, but not everyone sees it that way. Some species, they look at the humans and see a new kind of empire, one built on the ashes of the Kravaks. They fear that the humans will become the very thing they fought against. He drains the last of his drink, setting the glass down with a heavy thunk. Only time will tell, I suppose, but one thing's for sure. The galaxy will never be the same. The humans saw to that, for better or worse. Zax stares at Nox, his jaw hanging open. Wait. You're telling me the humans had these titans just sitting around disguised as mining equipment, and no one ever suspected a thing? Nox grins, his eyes twinkling with mirth. Oh, there were rumors, of course, strange sightings, unexplained malfunctions, but the humans were always quick to provide a plausible explanation, a glitch in the robot's programming, a trick of the light. They even went so far as to invite skeptical reporters to tour their facilities, showing off their state-of-the-art mining equipment. He leans back, chuckling at the memory. I remember one particularly persistent journalist, a Zorlak named Chris. He was convinced there was more to these machines than met the eye. He spent months investigating, digging through records and interviewing witnesses. But every lead he chased down turned out to be a dead end. The humans were always one step ahead, leaving just enough breadcrumbs to keep him chasing his tail. Zax shakes his head in amazement. I can't believe they managed to keep something like that hidden for so long. I mean, the resources alone must have been staggering. How did they fund a project of that scale without anyone noticing? Nox's expression turns serious. That's the thing about the humans. They're not just clever, they're also incredibly resourceful. They have a knack for finding unconventional solutions to problems. In this case, they used a combination of shell companies, offshore accounts, and some very creative accounting to funnel money into Project Goliath without raising any red flags. He takes a sip of his drink, savoring the burn. But the real genius was in the way they hid the Titans themselves. They didn't just stick them in a warehouse somewhere and hope no one would notice. No, they put them to work. They had them digging mines, constructing buildings, even assisting in disaster relief efforts. To the outside observer, they were just incredibly advanced robots, designed to make life easier for the humans and their allies. Zax leans forward, his eyes wide. But if they were so well hidden, how did the humans know when to deploy them? I mean, they couldn't just have them sitting around waiting for the Kravaks to show up, could they? Nox smiles, a glint of admiration in his eyes. No, they couldn't, which is why they developed a sophisticated network of spies and informants. all working to keep tabs on the Kravax's movements. They had eyes and ears everywhere, from the highest levels of government to the lowliest street vendor. And when the time came when the Kravax finally played their hand, the humans were ready. He leans forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. It happened on a small, unremarkable planet on the edge of Kravax space. The Praetorians landed in the dead of night, expecting to find a defenseless colony ripe for the taking. But what they found instead was a force of nature, a wall of metal and flesh that met them head-on and never backed down. Zax leaned forward, his eyes wide with anticipation. So what happened when the Titans were unleashed? Did they turn the tide of the war? Nox nodded, a grim smile on his face. They did more than that. They changed the very nature of the conflict. You see, when the Praetorians first encountered the Titans on the battlefield, they didn't know what to make of them. They had never seen anything like them before, and they had no idea how to fight them. He took a sip of his drink, his gaze distant as if reliving the memories. The Titans tore through their ranks like a scythe through wheat, their armor shrugging off even the most powerful of the Praetorians' weapons. The Kravax soldiers fired their plasma rifles, their graviton cannons, their quantum disruptors, but nothing could slow the Titans' advance. Nox's voice grew hushed, almost reverent. It was a sight to behold, Zax. The Titans moved with a grace and precision that belied their size, their movements fluid and almost dance-like. But there was nothing gentle about their purpose. They were there to kill, to destroy, to crush the Kravax beneath their armored feet. He shook his head. It was a massacre, a one-sided slaughter that left the Kravax reeling and demoralized. Their elite warriors, their most feared and respected soldiers, were being torn apart like rag dolls. The Praetorians' armor, which had been the stuff of nightmares for so many species, crumpled like tin foil under the Titans' relentless assault. Nox took a deep breath, his expression turning somber. But the victory came at a great cost. The Titans, for all their strength and power, were not invincible. They could be killed, and many of them were. The Praetorians, once they got over their initial shock, fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. They focused their fire, aiming for the joints in the Titan's armor, for the exposed cabling and hydraulics. His voice grew heavy with emotion. The humans mourned each loss like it was a member of their own family, for in a way the Titans were their children, their creations. They had poured their hearts and souls into them, and to see them fall was a blow that struck at the very core of their being. Zax nodded, his own expression one of sympathy. I can only imagine the pain they must have felt, to lose something so precious, so dear. It's a wound that never truly heals. Nox sighed, a deep, weary sound. In the end, the Titan's sacrifice was not in vain. They broke the back of the Kravax's resistance, and with their last, desperate gambit foiled, the Kravax had no choice but to surrender. The war was over, and the galaxy was free from their tyranny. But the cost was higher than anyone could have imagined. He looked up, his eyes haunted. The humans had won, but they had lost something in the process. They had unleashed a darkness within themselves, a fury and a savagery that they had never known before. They had become the very thing they had fought against, and in the end they were left to wonder if the price of victory had been too high. Nox nodded, a sad smile on his face. That's true. But the humans, they endure. They always have, and they always will. They'll pick up the pieces, and they'll rebuild. They'll learn from their mistakes, and they'll be stronger for it. That's the thing about humans. They never give up, no matter how hard it gets. And that, my friend, is why they are the most remarkable species in the galaxy. Zax pondered Nox's words, a thoughtful expression on his face. You said the humans lost something in the process, that they unleashed a darkness within themselves. What do you think that means for their future? Can they really come back from something like that? You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.